Welcome back to another episode of the On Deck Circle podcast, brought to you by the Fantasy Six Pack. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Z. You can find me on Twitter at nzanaboy93 that's it. I'm not giving you my email address. Anyway, I would like to get my man Jason on in here. Jason, come on down. I almost just doxed my email. Thousands of viewers.
I was like, where's this guy going with his Gmail account here?
Yeah. Gmail.com, I guess. But
yeah.
I don't
Good luck on the first part.
Solicited emails. I've got plenty of those.
You'll be getting the hate emails on your Player of the Week articles.
Hey, I mean,
or maybe love letters. I'm not sure, but
I'm not sure. Just wait till you hear me talk about Shane Baz this week. Spoiler.
Ooh, spoiler. Nice. I like it.
Spoiler. Before we actually get started, last week I had a cousin listen to the show, and I got in trouble for not shouting out my aunt. So, Aunt,
shout out
AC, if you are here. Hello.
Shout out AC.
Yep. And Jason, I need to know, what is that hoodie?
Oh, it's my Bart Simpson Hype Beast hoodie. So it's like, yeah.
That's fantastic.
Thanks, buddy.
I'm sure Dave has one just like it. Dave, come on in, you big lug.
I actually don't have the hoodie. I have the boxers. Yep. I'm not wearing. If I would have known, I would have worn the boxers, but we don't communicate very well. I want to say one thing here real quick, Nick. I feel strongly that you put the G in Gmail.
Gmail?
You know, like look at you got the
G.
You got the
the G.
Yeah, I'm saying like you put the G in Gmail.
If you
I wasn't sure where he was going with that.
15 years ago,
you'd be like 10.
I had the diamonds. I was ready to roll.
I bet you did, man. Like I don't know that many people that can look that sweet rocking a Juice beanie.
Yeah, that's me. Maybe Juice will sponsor me and sponsor the show, and then Jaylen Brown will come on the show and talk about baseball. I don't know if he knows baseball, but that's fine. Anyway,
right.
there's someone more important than me here.
Yeah, well, there's about to be. So we're gonna kind of throw a guest in here each week for the rest of the off season. God forbid, however long that may be. And one of the first people actually that I reached out to was the guy that's coming on here tonight. He's from Baseball Prospectus, and I guess there's no reason not to get him on here because we need another pretty face on screen. So let's go ahead and say hello to Mr. Jesse Roche.
Hey, fellas. It's great to be on.
Hey, what's going on, Jesse? We're happy to have you here, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's I'm definitely in full-on baseball and dynasty mode right now for sure.
Dude, that's a 364-day-a-year job.
It is. And at Baseball Prospectus, we have our positional series going on right now. So every week I'm putting out a hefty article about each position. This week's third base. So last 2 weeks did first base and second base and over 6,000 words each article. If you are not subscribing to Baseball Prospectus, please do. You know, it's not just our dynasty content. There's also fantastic real life content. There's top 10 prospect lists. There's all kinds of scouting, the in-person scouting the prospect team does at Prospects or Baseball Prospectus. So give us a sub and trust me, it'll be worth it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, if you're not following Jesse, that's your first mistake. If you're not following along at Baseball Prospectus as well, that's mistake number 2. But we do have bigger fish to fry here real quick, Jesse. Nick has got I got something to share with Nick real quick. Nick, take a look at the screen.
Pup is here. Wow. We are
all right.
We are in the presence of greatness tonight.
Billy, Claire, and Papa. They're in the chat.
They're all
we're all watching. All right.
We'll throw that out there before we get some bot comments in. All right. Well, let's kind of jump into things here real quick. Let's start with the Dynasty Deep Dive. We're doing the Angels this week. Nick, do you want to go ahead and lead off?
Yeah. Speaking of lead off, this guy could lead off for the Angels. Did you plan that, Dave?
Sure. I'm not above taking credit for things.
I'm going to go with Brandon Marsh, who's somebody that's, again, I feel like this is the third week in a row we've talked about prospect fatigue. And he's someone that's last year got his first cup of coffee, and his numbers, his percentile numbers were a lot better than I thought they were going to be when I first picked him. I just picked him because I was like, oh, he has a cool beard, all that stuff. But he's 95th in percentile speed last year, and that's something that I expected to see. He's a guy that gets on that when he's on base, he can run like hell. But what surprised me was how hard he hit the ball. He was 86th percentile in max exit velo, 51% hard hit rate, which was great for him. That was, I think, it's like around where Devers was, and you know me, love me some Devers. So any person that's near Devers in anything, I'm all in. And his line drive rate was 31.3. And he hits the ball hard enough. And then if he gets on the base, he's going to steal you 25, 30 bases if he can get on the base. But his strikeout rate was tough last year with 35%. He's someone that I think you can get fairly cheap unless somebody is really in on him. But what say you, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said about Marsh rings true. You know, he has a dynamic power speed combo. He really did struggle with contact and whiffs in his debut. You know, 35% strikeout rate. It probably oversold how it probably made it look a lot worse than it actually was. You know, his whiff rate was fairly reasonable, 33%. Chase rate was pretty reasonable at 27.3%. He's always received glowing reports regarding his hit tool. He does, spray the ball to all fields. I think that how much power he'll get to in games is an open question since his swing is more geared to line drives and, again, spray contact. He sprays all fields. He's not one of those lift and pull bats, which is so popular now in the major leagues. So I'm not sure he's going to get to a ton of power right away. But like you said, there's plus speed. There is plus raw power in that bat for sure. I mean, he flashed it this past year. I think there is 2020 upside. I don't know if it's happening right away. I don't know how much of an opportunity he's going to get this year. There's a little bit of a crowd, but there are not many people that I think are going to compete with him in center other than, of course, Mike Trout. But I think that he's a lefty bat. That lineup needs lefty bats. I think he's going to find a way into that lineup. And I agree. He's a great value right now in both Dynasty and in redraft because his price is pretty low because of his so-so debut.
Yeah, and I mean, I do want to echo real quick what Jesse said about, him spraying the ball around the field. I mean, him hitting the ball to the opposite field was almost equal to his pull percentage. Basically hit the ball to the opposite field 30% of the time, pulled it 33. So that's quite impressive for a young player. And I think what really stands out for me when I looking over stuff is, he did well against the fastball. He hit 318 against the fastball. With an XBA at 291. So, might have slightly exceeded expectation there. But, where we expect to see young guys struggle is, breaking and off-speed pitches. So 179 and 162 batting average, respectively, there. And as a matter of fact, on the off-speed pitches, he was well over 100 points below his XBA on that. So he's definitely got room for improvement there. But I think that's what you would expect to see from him. So that doesn't turn me off to him. If anything, it kind of gives me reason, to hope that, we are going to see more from him, hopefully in short order.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, Jason, you want to go ahead and talk about your pitcher?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about pitchers here. And it was maybe a little bit not so much of a surprise, but I'm going to go with Patrick Sandoval. He had a stellar 2021 season, which was actually, unfortunately, cut short to injury, but still was able to log about 87 innings. And a lot of that success he had last year was from a pitch mix change. He stopped relying on his fastball, kind of started throwing more of a sinker, and then obviously he relied really heavily on that changeup. It led to great success. His CSW ranked in the top 10% of the league. The whiff rate ranked in the top 8% of the league. And that changeup is almost near elite, if not elite already. On his changeup alone, he had a 51% whiff rate, and he had a 31% put away rate on that. And then of all the pitchers with at least 80 innings pitched last year, that changeup put away percent ranked second only to Devin Williams and actually led in whiff rate. So, I mean, the changeup is elite. Obviously, it's a short sample size, but I don't think it's anything to, scoff at because clearly he showed that he can throw it with great success. And if it wasn't for that injury, I mean, his value would probably be even higher right now. Again, only 87 innings. still kind of, up and comers, only 25 years old. So he's got some, maybe some time to grow at the major league level. But, the injury risk maybe can scare some people away. But, I think his value could go even higher from here on out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. A changeup is deadly. That whiff rate on his changeup is amazing. Over 50% whiffs on a pitch in general is fantastic. On a changeup, it's out of this world. His slider is actually not bad too. It's a mid 80s pitch. About averages over to 85 miles an hour, which is like the sweet spot you want for like a slider. You want sliders to be 85 and up, in my mind. Unless it's lower, it has to have big, like two-plane movement usually. And I think that it has plenty of vertical movement. I think it's going to miss plenty of bats. Those two pitches, I think, will offset some issues I have with his fastball. His fastball's movement profile is mediocre. Its velocity is average. It's going to play up a bit because of how good his changeup is, but I think that he may live or die on how good that fastball ends up being and how many bats how it can limit contact. My concern, though, is the injury. He had a lower back stress fracture. I had 2 lower back stress fractures in my life, both in high school. They suck and they last. They don't go away. I know he has much better training. He's obviously a much better athlete than I am. So I have hope that he'll be able to, rebound from it. And the fact that the Angels do have a 6-man rotation should help limit his innings and allow him to remain healthy. But that's another thing, that we must consider with all of these Angel arms is that they're not going to get full workloads. Never. As long as Shohei Ohtani is healthy. And even if he's not healthy, I'm sure they're probably going to stick to that 6-man rotation, which means you may never see a 2-start week from any Angel starter, which eats into their value in all leagues, because especially leagues where you're trying to stream pitchers, and trying to target those 2-start outings. And someone like Sandoval may be a guy who's like a borderline option in shallow leagues. And those borderline options are ideal streaming options. And he's not a streamable pitcher usually. So that's a consideration. But for dynasty purposes, I do like him because, those secondaries are filthy.
Yeah. And just to echo a few things here, bottom 7 percentile in fastball spin rate. So, I mean, that concerns me. I am a guy that's, pretty heavy on the spin metric. So when I see that low of spin, it concerns me. But when I look at like his average exit velocity, he was in the top 5%, or I'm sorry, top 3% of the league. And I consider average exit velocity just superior to max exit velocity. I honestly don't understand why people give so much credence to, max exit velocity, because that could just be an outlier of an outcome. The average exit velocity is what I, put a lot of, stock in. So when
even if we had access to 50th percentile exit velocity, which I know that Chris Clegg has put together, that's even better because, average exit velocity has those like outlier 20-mile-an-hour hits too. So, I mean, you made a great point on that.
Yeah. But I mean, that to me just, when I look at, a pitcher and I'm trying to get a feel for his stuff, whiff rate and, average exit velocity are 2 things that I gravitate towards as kind of, I wouldn't call them sneaky stats, but I think things that people don't think to look at. So let me get to my guy here. We're going to go, I've got Prospect as usual, and I like to go and go a little deeper than, guys that are a little more off the radar. And, oddly enough, this guy is a little bit off the radar as far as his name is concerned, because he's not even my favorite prospect with this name. And I'm talking about Alexander Ramirez, who isn't my Alexander Ramirez on the Mets, but it's still a guy that I like nonetheless. I'm not a huge fan right now of the Angels system. I don't think they've got, a whole ton of things that I'm, super excited about. But Alexander Ramirez is a guy I find interesting. He's got a little bit of, a power and speed, combo. He's got a nice arm as well. So, in the chance that he doesn't end up, getting the chance to play or stick in center field, he definitely has, the tools to be able to get out into right field. And, his numbers, there's not a lot to look at right now. In minor leagues, we're talking about, 350 basically total at bats. So not a lot to go off of there. But I mean, the numbers aren't, they don't jump off the page at you. You know, 218 average, 325 on base. You know, not a lot there. 9 home runs and 10 stolen bases. So, you know, I mean, you can see, you know, that there's some potential that's there. You probably have to be in a relatively deep league for him to be a guy that, you know, you're going to be looking at rostering. But it is someone to keep an eye on. There may or may not even be a spot for him in the outfield. So depending on, you know, the trajectory that the Angels take, you know, maybe he becomes trade bait if he starts to pan out a little bit. But what do you think about my second favorite, Alexander Ramirez, Jesse?
I think you're right to say he's the second favorite. You know, I think he's a great player to profile in the system. You make a great point. I think that, you know, what the Angels have done with hitters in particular of late has been targeting these high-risk athletic players that have suspect hit tools. Ramirez certainly falls squarely in that boat. You know, he has an athletic projectable frame with lots of power potential. I think, you know, you can definitely see potential plus power as he continues to fill out. I think that he has already started to see time in right field. I think he's likely a corner outfielder long term. I think that's what the prospect team thinks at Baseball Prospectus as well. But that won't matter if he can get to that plus power. And, you know, even if speed's not a big deal, if he can get to that plus power in games, that could be a legit prospect. But the question is how much he'll hit. You know, he did really well at the complex. You know, he hit 276, 396, 512. His contact rate was perfectly fine, about 70%. But then he went to low A, and it was just 19 games. And we must give him a huge grain of salt for these 19 games, basically at 18 years old, just having turned 19. And in those games, he hit. Well, I'm not even going to give the slash. He was 5 for 8 for 72. He was 5 for 72 with 34 strikeouts. So 42% strikeout rate. And his contact rate dipped to like 58%. That's a disaster. All that said, you know, the barrel control and pitch recognition are issues. But he does have a semblance of like a strikes. No, he can command a strike zone a little bit. You know, he's not a super aggressive hitter. You often see those issues with these young prospects. He has patience. He has some plate discipline. And with that power, I think you're right. He's a great player to target later on in deeper leagues. I had him at 412 in August, 410. He was 410 overall among prospects for me in August. He dropped off due to his struggles in low A. I was probably premature. You've actually brought this back to my attention and to my mind. Like, I really probably should get him back on my list because of his tools. His tools are excellent types of flyers you want to take in deeper leagues later on.
I could be wrong. I could look it up, but I'm not going to take the time because it doesn't matter. But I may own him in 30 Rock. I'm not sure, honestly. I own the other Alexander Ramirez almost everywhere, and I think I might own him in 30 Rock. But either way,
well, you'll own him soon enough then. Let's see. The owner is you. Yes, you do own him, and you do not own the other Alex. You don't own the Mets one in that league. So.
I can't own him literally everywhere. That might be the only league that I have that I don't own the Mets Alexander Ramirez, honestly. But whatever. All right, let's get into first base here. This is kind of what we're here for. Jesse is all prepped up after his article covering this, so this ought to be a nice conversation here. So let's just get into my 1 through 5, which I know Nick doesn't know because I don't know if Nick ever reads. And Jason might have an idea, so we'll see. But I mean, the number 1 I think is pretty obvious. I got Vlad Jr. He's 4th overall in my rankings. We've talked ad nauseum about Vlad. Freddie Freeman comes in 2nd. You know, another tier of player outside of Vlad. So I think Vlad's clearly tier 1. I think Freddie Freeman's clearly tier 2. He comes in 16th overall for me. When we get down to the next tier, we got Matt Olson coming in 3rd. I got Austin Riley on the list. Every league's a little bit different with, you know, eligibility requirements. Most things that I'm in are at 10, and he just barely fits the bill. So I don't mind if we skip over Austin Riley a little bit. We talked about him, you know, with the third base quite a bit. And then coming in 5th, I got Pete Alonso, 43rd overall. So Vlad, Freddie Freeman, Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Pete Alonso. Jesse, what do you think of the top 5?
I mean, I think it is basically exactly what my top 5 is, in the exact order my top 5 is. So
Yeah.
I'm all for it. I think I didn't get to talk about Vlad, but obviously I've been for a long time saying that he has next Miguel Cabrera vibes, and
Absolutely.
that's his upside. And he clearly showed it last year.
Hey,
Um,
you want to see something funny, Jesse? You just said
yeah.
you just talked about Miguel and about Vlad, right?
Yes.
So I know that the other guys know this and you don't yet, but you see all the stuff behind me, right?
hmm
But you don't know what I'm looking at. So let me show you real quick what I'm looking at, okay?
All
So
right.
on one side, we've got a Vlad little shrine, and guess
Yep.
what's on the other?
Miggy.
Miguel Cabrera.
Yeah.
So how
Very
funny
cool.
that you just
Yeah.
happened to, and that's what I'm staring at. So,
That is
anyways,
wild. Anyway, I mean, I think it's a great comp because it fits so
yeah,
well. These are two guys who can hit and they hit for power. And I think, they're doing it at young ages. I think Vlad's going to be a fixture for a long time. I don't know if he's going to replicate what he did last year since he did so much of it at Dunedin. And that was one of the most hitter-friendly parks in all of baseball during the brief time it was the Toronto's home park. So he had a 807 slugging percentage there. So I think we can probably maybe back up the power a little bit, but you have to also
I
think
agree.
that he may take strides forward because he's only 23 years old. So I think he's like I feel like there's Vlad and then there's like a few tier breaks and then there's Freddie Freeman. And there's a massive gap between the two for me. And I just think that he stands alone. I would have no problem taking Vlad like even as high as 3rd overall in redraft. I think with the recent Acuna news with his injury recovery and the potential delay of the season, I'm willing to maybe push Acuna back ahead of Vlad, but I think Vlad definitely belongs in that conversation, and he may cement himself in that conversation after this year.
The question I want to ask you, Jesse, about Vlad specifically, is I think I echo the same sentiments that I do have a little concern that he can repeat and or improve on those numbers from last year, and I think what you mentioned about his home park and where he may or may not be playing is part of it. The other part of it for me is I think obviously the major difference that we can look at and see with him was the difference in his launch angle, and I just am curious your thoughts on if that is something you think that you will find that he slowly regresses back towards, or if you just think that he just has such elite, bat to ball skills that that's something that we can expect to see him maintain going forward.
I think he's going to maintain it. If anything, I think he may increase his launch angle, which I don't think is going to be necessarily ideal because we're talking about a hitter that has basically 7 hit, 7 game power. And yeah, if he increases that launch angle, he may get some more power in game. I mean, arguably his game power might be 8, honestly. I might be a little low
His
on that.
his hit tool might be an 8 too.
It might be. I mean, I think that there's a risk if he increases his launch angle and put more balls in the air. Yeah, he may hit more home runs or as many as he did, but that average, his batting average on balls in play is going to get there's going to be downward pressure on because too many fly balls often equate to pop-ups or like lazy flyouts or flyouts to a warning track that can be easy outs. So I think right now he's in the sweet spot. Obviously, you don't want him to put more balls on the ground for sure, but maybe if he reduces his ground ball rate a little bit down to like 40%, that may be able to take him to that next level. And I think there's room for contact even. I think you can make more contact, especially on breaking balls and off speed pitches. And if that improves too, his contact rate improves, I mean, there's no telling what his upside might be. I mean, he could be like a 340 hitter with 50 bombs. I mean, that legit could happen. That's why I love Vlad, and especially if you're in in leagues that are not so concentrated on stolen bases. If you're like in points leagues or in simulation leagues, I think there's a really legitimate argument for Vlad, even as high as 2 in Dynasty behind Soto. Because I really think he's going to be a mainstay stud for a long time.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think the 1 through 5 is probably pretty common. I mean, you might be able to move some names around, but I think that stands pretty still. I think maybe when we get through 6 through 10, especially the back half of it, I think that's where we can see some things change. And when I get into number 6, we got Spencer Torkelson, who I think is right around the same range as Pete Alonso. Probably just pick your poison for maybe your risk tolerance with who to take there. But I would put him in that same tier. Then we have a bit of a drop off, and I think the next 4 guys, for me at least, are pretty interchangeable. Depends on what you're looking for, but rankings wise, I got Alex Kirilloff, 7th here, coming in 74th overall. Right behind him, Paul Goldschmidt, 79th overall, and then Jose Abreu 9th, and he is 86th overall. And then rounding up the top 10 is Chris Bryant at 88th overall. So to get through 6 through 10, Spencer Torkelson, Alex Kirilloff, Paul Goldschmidt, Jose Abreu, Chris Bryant. What do you guys think about that little mix of 5 guys?
After seeing your top 10, I was just wondering, where do you have? I know we have like Riley in there and Brian, who are basically, I know they qualify for first base, but if you took those guys out, where's the Rhys Hoskins? Where do you have him ranked? Like just outside top 10, or?
A second here.
Just curious.
No. So here on this, Rhys Hoskins, just for first base, I've got him down to 22nd.
Wow.
For Dynasty.
Hoskins is 14 for me, and I don't include Riley. It's only people. Well, I don't include Riley. It's basically first base and some of the first base
primary position.
Guys.
Yeah.
If you want to take those 2 guys out, the next 2 guys that have first base eligibility, you can tell me if you want to cut one of these guys out, and I'll work my way down. 11th on this list would be Max Muncy. 12th on this list would be JT Realmuto. Do you want me to cut one of those guys?
I mean, Real Muto is not going to ever. No one's ever going to be playing him at first base.
No, I don't think so.
Or a fantasy league. So, I mean,
so next on that list is Jake Cronenworth.
Same. I think you'd put him at second.
I agree.
Yeah.
So then to round it out, then as far as I think we would need to go, will be Andrew Vaughn. I've got him up at 14.
Yeah.
And he may not have first base eligibility in a lot of leagues. I mean, I think he only had 19 games at first base last year. So for leagues that have 20 game eligibility requirements, he will only be eligible in the outfield. I do think he'll gain at first base eligibility at some point this year. It's just I can't predict when that may be, because obviously there's Abreu, there's Gavin Sheets, who's going to likely demand some playing time. So we'll see about that. But I guess if walking it back a little bit before we get to the second half real fast, I just want to touch on Olsen and Alonso real fast. I think there may be, in my opinion, I think they are very close, especially when you are not in OBP formats. Because in OBP, I think Olsen definitely gets a leg up on Alonso, but in average formats, they are remarkably close. In fact, I think it's actually kind of silly to me that PECOTA, which is the projection system that Baseball Prospectus puts out, the PECOTA projections for Alonso are 267 average and a 524 slugging percentage. For Olsen, that's for Olsen, sorry. For Alonso, it's 266 average and 523 slugging percentage. So it's the same. They're the same. They're the same player for PECOTA. I think that, Alonso actually outproduced Olsen in the second half last year. And I think that with the new additions to the Mets offense, I think there's a lot more run production potential with Alonso. And, who knows what's going to happen with Olsen. He might get traded out of Oakland. But Oakland, people may think that's a huge pitcher's spark, but it kind of played neutral-ish. So there's a chance that he could end up in a worse situation offensively. Of course, he could go to the Yankees and then just explode. So that's another thing to think about with Olsen. He could get moved.
Yeah, I mean, I actually expect him to get moved, and I don't obviously know the park that he would go to in that scenario, but I would be willing to bet that the lineup that he moves to is significantly better.
Yes, 1,000%.
And so that's where I think I have the gap, and maybe that's a little bit of crystal ball reading. But
it's significantly better where it is now. Where it is now. Last year, Oakland actually had a decent lineup. And, they had Starling Marte there for the second half of the year. Mark Cano was there. Yes, they had Matt Chapman, who's still, doing his inconsistent thing. But, that Oakland lineup was okay last year. Yeah, it looks rough right now. So, obviously, if he moves, that'll probably be a good situation for him this year and moving forward.
So, anything else we want to highlight here, 6 through 10?
I think
even if only we talk about at some point, what you think about Goldschmidt, because I think the hot topic there, quite obviously, is just when does he stop stealing bases? Because as soon as he stops doing that, he's going to drop on this list dramatically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that I would not bet on it at all. I wouldn't bet stolen bases at all. Goldschmidt is a well below average runner. Regardless, I will always say that stolen bases pure speed has less impact in stolen bases than a lot of people think. There's Elvis Andrus a few years back was incredibly slow, nearing the end of his career. He's still playing, but the end of his useful career, and he still sold 30 bases. So I think that he could still steal. It's about opportunity and instincts, and I mean, there's a chance he could get some stolen bases, but it's not something I would be betting on with Goldschmidt. What I'd be betting on with him is that he's one of the few players at the position that can give you average. Most years can give you home runs, because he's basically the lock for 30 home runs. Even hit 31 home runs playing for St. Louis, and St. Louis is one of the more notorious pitcher parks in baseball. And he's a lock for basically 200 total run production, runs and RBIs. Not many players are like that, so I'm not as concerned if he doesn't steal bases. It's just what other first baseman can do what he can do with those 4 categories, like Vlad and Freddie, and that's it. There's no other first baseman. So I get it. I mean, for the longest time this offseason, I was seeing him creeping up ADP up until like 50, and I was just like, why are people doing that with Paul Goldschmidt, a 34-year-old who plays in a difficult home park? And yeah, I mean, they can't expect him to actually continue what he did, but I mean, his second half last year was bananas. He had like 330, 20 home runs. It was just insane. 7 stolen bases in the second half. So I'm and a lot of his underlying stats are very similar to what it's always been in his career. During the StatCast era, his average exit velocity, max exit velocity, hard hit rate, they were all career best last year. I have a feeling that he's not done, and I'm okay with him, but I would be wary of him as a top 100 player. I mean, I had him at 120 in my last update. He's going to go up a little higher, mainly because of what has happened at Camden Yards, because Mountcastle's falling, and I think Mountcastle and Mancini are weakening the position because there's, I think, more doubt on how much power they can provide. So players like Goldschmidt that provide stability at this position, which is not what it once was, cause him to be elevated. But I think a 34-year-old top 100 player is kind of scary in Dynasty, because if he has a bad year, his value goes straight into the tank.
Yeah, and I'm definitely higher on him for redraft than I am, just for Dynasty, for pretty much every reason that you just said. Let's get into the prospects here. The first base is interesting. I feel like it's, I don't know. Well, let's just get into it before I give my opinions here.
I think I'm going to be happy.
Yeah, maybe. So top 5, a tier all by himself, obviously. Spencer Torkelson, it's him, and then a huge drop off. Some guy that I never heard of, but Nick forced me to put in here, Tristan Cassis. I'm not quite sure who that is, but Nick said he was quitting if I didn't mention him. And then we dropped to, again, a whole nother tier for Nick Prado. Dustin Harris comes in 4th. I've got him 379th overall. And then a name that might surprise a lot of people, Vinny Pasquantino. I've got him coming in 397th. So that is 2 Kansas City Royals first base prospects in the top 5. What do you guys think about that group of 5?
I have a question for anybody in the room. Explain to me the Nick Prado thing, because he's someone that 5 years ago was probably drafted. I feel like it's just taken him a very long time. And now this new guy just kind of came out of literally nowhere. Like, I've just heard about him like this off season. That's me being like ignorant to like looking into things.
Well,
but are you sure you don't like him because of his first name?
No.
So I know how you operate. You like guys on the Red Sox, and you like guys named Nick. Everyone else can kind of fuck off.
I mean, and guys that hit home runs
and dingers,
and you like dingers.
Well, so
and Vinny,
Nick York must be like a huge deal for him.
yeah.
He's got
Pasquantino. He just had a great 2021 season, so I think he kind of just jumped up everyone's boards. If that kind of helps answer your question. And then Prado, he's been around.
Be the guy at first for the Royals.
I think it's going to be Prado.
Okay.
I think Pasquantino is going to be a DH. I think that he's a huge man, like a massive human being. I don't think He's hulking. He's a beefy boy. I've said that a few times about a few players, including Tristan Casas, who is up to 265.
Oh,
so
he's an absolute
man.
house.
Yeah. So, I don't know about Pasquantino. I mean, he had a huge year, in high A and double A. He was a small school prospect. I think he was an 11th round pick. He actually had a massive debut in 2019. I think he would have been more well known had he, had a year in 2020.
2020, yeah.
I think there was some hype about his debut. You never know what these, but in short season, as an older prospect out of college, these guys should be mashing in short season out debuts. Pasquantino, though, I am concerned a little bit, about his age relative to competition levels in high A. I mean, he should have destroyed high A, and of course, he did destroy high A. He turned 24 years old in October, so he's older than all of his competition level in high A. In double A was definitely more age appropriate, and of course, he continued to mash. The power is very real. I mean, he's a big dude. 60, probably 60 brawl for sure. But the hit tool's also quite good. He makes a ton of contact, over 80% contact rate at all levels last year. I think, and he does use the whole field. I think that this could be an above average hit tool. The issue that I've seen is that, yeah, his slash looks good against lefties, but the reports are not great for him against lefties, and that his stance and his swing, there's perceived platoon issues, and he didn't hit he had only hit 3 home runs against left-handed pitching last year. His ISO was like 150 against lefties. I think there's a concern that there's a platoon issue with him, and of course the defensive concern where his role will ultimately be with the Royals. I mean, he's going to be 25 years old after the year. I like Pasquantino, and I know for a fact that I was too low on him, and he is going to be moving up for me. And it's definitely closer than people may think between him and Prado. But you got to also remember, Prado was 22 years old last year, and he was at AA and AAA. And yeah, he's probably going to be a 3 true outcomes hitter, which means he's going to strike out, walk, or hit a home run. That's probably what he is. I mean, his contact rates were not great last year. They're about 65%. That's not good. And if it gets worse at the major league level, but he doesn't chase. He has excellent plate discipline. So while his contact rate is sketch, he picks his times to attack, and I think he'll hit enough, and especially if that contact rate improves, that I think he could develop into like a 250, 30+ home run bat. And he's much better defender than Pasquantino. I think he's going to be the long-term solution at first base. But I mean, I understand and 100% understand the love that Pasquantino is getting, and he should be moving up. But we need to be wary, extremely wary of players like him. I'll pick names out, but I'll come back with names in a second that I can comp him to in a way. Incredibly loose comp, and just as a warning to everyone with their love for Pasquantino. But continue. I'll be back.
All right. Well, while you're doing that here, we'll go 6 through 10 then real quick, and I'll just run through that. So number 6, I've got Juan Yepez at 416th overall. Number 7, Jonathan Aranda, 482nd overall. Maybe one of Jason's favorites here, Seth Beer, comes in at 492. I know that would be AJ and Joe's favorite guy.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Taglia comes in 9th at 509 overall. And then kind of rounding it out here, 10th, we got Shirt and Apostle, 574th overall. So we get to the last 2 guys don't make the top 500. Kind of similar to what we had with second base. Mm-hmm. Not a whole lot here, honestly, that I'm super excited about 6 through 10. But that's what I'm looking at. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest takeaways, I think, just in your top 10 year, and you see this year in and year out, maybe the last couple of years, is just that the first base has just kind of lost its way. I used to get these big, thinking about like just a couple of years ago, you had Pete Alonso and all the guys coming up. You used to get, these top prospects that were first base, and I don't even know. Take out Torkelson. A lot of these guys were barely in your top 100 prospects. So I think the first just outlying this issue of maybe just recently, something I noticed is that just first base isn't that sexy prospect list. Maybe it's just me overlooking some of these guys, but
it's never been. It's never been.
Yeah,
Because first base always is like the position of
people
last
move
resort.
there, right? Yeah,
Yes. So
Absolutely.
these players that are like playing third base,
third. Yeah,
like Noel
Can't
for
fail
Cleveland, like
because he
he's
can
probably
hit.
going to be a first baseman. Like that's what they hope he'll be, I
Mhm,
imagine.
yeah.
Because he's Framley Reyes 2.0. Like that's who he is, big dude. He's probably going to be a first baseman, but we're all listing him at third base because that's where he played the majority of his time last year, barely. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of players at all kinds of positions that are likely going to be playing at first base in the future. So the position is going to look better. Dustin Harris, who's a first baseman right now, is going to move to the outfield. So they're going to lose a prospect. He's transitioning to the outfield this new year. So, yeah, the position's not great. I think that deeper down, I'm not keen on players like Michael Taglia. I don't think he's going to hit at all. And, same thing with Apostle. I just don't think it's going to happen for him. And Toribio is just he had such a disaster fall in your face year. A player that you didn't list here that you may have put in the outfield that I don't think people need to pay attention to is Anthony Garcia for the New York Yankees. I know Jordan Rosenblum at the Dynasty Guru is like obsessed with him because he had this massive statistical season between complex and low A. And look, we just talked about max exit velocity, but dude hits the ball hard. His max exit velocity was almost 116 miles an hour last year in low A Southeast. So he has huge power, big dude, 6'5", and he has great plate. He has pretty strong plate discipline already. He's very patient, and he doesn't chase a ton. There's a lot of swing and miss in his game because he's a 6'5" slugger as young. But if he could develop, he's one of those players who has a shot at developing something like 80 grade raw power. So with a semblance of a hit tool, maybe. And someone like that is someone that needs to be on people's radar. And he's a Yankee, so he's going to have huge hype. So just beware of him.
Yeah, Yankees like power bats.
Mhm.
And they do such a great job on the international market in terms
Absolutely.
of scouting. I know for the Red Sox fans out there, I'm so sorry, but the Yankees do such a great job on the international market. They do a great job spending and developing, and they target a lot of high upside players, both pitchers and hitters. So they always have prospects that are popping, and now they're really doing well drafting at the major league level too on the major league draft. So that system's just stacked from top to bottom. But
Gotta love a switch hitting power first baseman, right? It's like ideal. Like that's what you would look, for a team.
Yeah, I think a player that you listed in the second tier that I think we need to pay attention to is Juan Yepez.
He's a beefy boy.
He is a beefy boy, and he can play defense. He's probably, and if the NL gets to DH, he may be one of the huge beneficiaries. And
like this year too.
This year, immediately, like he might come in and immediately take that DH role. But I mean, the Cardinals do have other options. There's Lars Nootbaar who could conceivably see time there. They could rest other players, but I think Yepez, like if you go to Roster Resource, just look at the Cardinals 40-man roster. I think they do a good job of like laying it out. The players that are on the 40-man roster, if you give them the NLDH, they would only have 4 bats on their bench before free agent acquisitions, and Yepez is one of them. So he's one of the few bats that are actually on the 40-man right now. I think he has a very good shot of breaking camp as a starter for the Cardinals, or at least in a substantial role. And, dude has huge power, has great power. He has a feel to hit. He's very aggressive. I think he's going to be maybe a small liability in OBP leagues, but the prospect team at Baseball Prospectus this is what they're usually fairly conservative. A lot of the analysts are. They had him projected to be a 260 to 270 hitter with 30 home runs at peak. And that could be very soon. That's huge. If Yepez can get playing time and get to that in games, he's going to be a huge, massive riser. I just don't know, if there isn't a DH, which I think that too many analysts are just expecting it. It's going to happen. There's a very real chance it doesn't happen. If there's a chance that lockout ends, they don't finalize the CBA and they return to the old CBA, which does not have the NLDH. That could really hurt the way people are actually valuing players expecting the NLDH. So just beware of that. But he could definitely be a huge beneficiary.
All right, Jesse. Well, hey, man, we appreciate you coming on, spitting a little bit of knowledge at us. I'm sure Nick was thrilled to hear about how good the Yankees are at signing international prospects. I'm guessing
You're
that'll
not
be
allowed
Nick's.
back on, Jesse.
I'm sure that'll be Nick's next article for us. But just, if you want to just remind everyone real quick again, Jesse, where they can find you, and what kind of things maybe they can look forward to in the future from you.
Sure. You can find all my work at Baseball Prospectus. You can find me on Twitter at JARoche6, ROCHE6. I put out decent bit of content on Twitter, especially during the season. I do a lot of prospect oriented stuff. I watch a lot of video. I go to games. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, so I go to a lot of low A Riverdale games, which is Tampa's affiliate down here, and they're always loaded. There's going to be a lot of great talent in low A East this year, so I'm really excited about that. But meanwhile, we're doing the positional series at Baseball Prospectus, and like I said, we've done first base, second base. This week's third base. Then we're going to be hitting all the other ones: shortstop, catcher, outfield, etc. And just plowing along, assuming the season's starting on time. And if it's not, there's still going to be tons of content at Baseball Prospectus, not just fantasy and dynasty content, but real life content and a lot of just great articles and stories.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't start to give out your email address like Nick. So, at least somebody knows what's going on. So, all right. Well, Jesse, we appreciate your time, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Anyone interested, next week, the plan is to have Jesse Goldberg Strassler on. For those who don't know who he is the play-by-play announcer for the Lansing Lugnuts. So that's my hometown minor league team, I suppose. It's an affiliate of the Oakland A's. We're going to have him on, and we're going to be doing some Toronto Blue Jays talk. So maybe we'll get a little bit more Vlad in there. The Lugnuts prior to last season were a Blue Jays affiliate. So that is why I've seen so much, Bichette and so much Vlad. I watched them quite a bit. And so Jesse still has quite a knowledge on the Blue Jays. So we're gonna pick his brain there. But appreciate everyone tuning in again this week, and we will look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everybody.
See you, boys.
See ya.